So welcome everyone. As part of the AlumLab project, we are pleased to be hosting this session for alumni, postdocs, and trainees of our master's and PhD programs here at the University of Alberta Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry. First, let me start by acknowledging that the University of Alberta is located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. My name is Elise Hetu, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry, and I'll be your host tonight for this session. The AlumLab project is a Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry initiative that creates space and provides programming for networking and connection. This session is part of the Career Incubator Webinar Series, one of the AlumLab programs. This series profiles different members of the AlumLab project as they discuss the nooks and crannies of their career paths. And I'm sure you'll be amazed at the diversity of places our members have explored and the people they've met. There's other ways to be involved with the AlumLab project. The Coffee Break series offers members a chance to expand their personal networks by meeting a few other members in a small group format. And for the time, we'll hold these virtually over Zoom. And each coffee break session is typically hosted by one AlumLab member who was a speaker from the Career Incubator Webinar Series. Additionally, you can connect at your own pace with other members through Switchboard, which is the U of A's online career connection tool, or get involved in a mentorship program. The AlumLab website has all the details on these programs. The session tonight is titled, Now What? Tales from the First Few Years After Graduation. Our panelists are three recent grads who've remained friends since graduating and who've all ventured into various industries since finishing their PhDs. A number of questions were submitted in advance through the registration form for the session, but feel free to submit further questions live using the Q&A box located probably at the bottom of your screen. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and it will be available after the event for those who missed it live. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists and moderator. Our first panelist tonight is Dr. Vanessa Carias. She's currently the Research Program Manager at Genome, Alberta, where she oversees exciting genomics projects in Alberta. Her role includes managing project budgets, outputs, and timelines on research projects that will benefit various fields from agriculture to health. Vanessa has a PhD in medical genetics, and during her doctoral studies, she was very involved in planning science outreach events, including one called School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Science is Magic. That experience led her to a job right after graduation at the TELUS World of Science in Science Outreach and Communications. Our next panelist is Dr. Ping Wei. He works as a scientist for Entos Pharmaceuticals, where he developed the Fusogenics gene delivery technology that will be used for a COVID-19 vaccine candidate entering phase 1 clinical trials. His role includes research and development, process development, overseeing manufacturing, and quality control assay development. Ping received his PhD in medical genetics, and during his studies, he was a teaching assistant and a guest lecturer. He also worked at Cytiva, formerly GE Healthcare Life Sciences, as a university representative, selling, marketing, and advertising life sciences equipment and consumables at the U of A. Our third panelist is Dr. Jasdeep Van, and she is an oncology medical science liaison with Astellas Pharma Canada, located in Vancouver. In her role, she works closely with oncologists to gain insights on the current treatment and management of prostate cancer and acute myeloid leukemia patients to help inform the medical strategy of Astellas. Jasdeep completed her PhD in biochemistry, and during that time, she was the president of the Biochemistry Graduate Students Association and was the graduate student representative on the FoMD Professionalism Committee and Graduate Student Advisory Committee. And finally, our last speaker is our moderator for this session, Abby Seewald. Abby is currently a student in the Masters of Public Health program. And over the past several summers, Abby has taken on roles as a summer research student in the Faculty of Medicine and Dentistry. One of her roles had her working under one of our panelists, Vanessa, in the Department of Medical Genetics. This is also where Abby met Ping. And currently she's conducting research on asthma in sports through the Department of Family Medicine. Outside of academia, Abby is a figure skating coach and volunteers as a triage team member with the U of A's rapid response team for COVID-19 contact tracing and monitoring. So with that, I will turn it over to Abby and our panelists for what should be a very interesting discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction, Elise, and welcome to the webinar, everybody. We'll now begin our discussion with the panelists, and please feel free to ask any questions using the Q&A box as we progress through the webinar. So to jump right into it, for our first question, I would like to hear input from each of the panelists. And my question is, how did you translate skills and knowledge gained through your graduate work to your various workplaces? Vanessa, can you have you started us off?
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. And to address Abby's question, I think what I did originally was I sat down and thought of all the things I learned in my PhD and the skills I obtained there. So lab reporting, writing papers, every skill can be translated to a job. So writing and communication is so important. And in my job as research program manager, I do a lot of writing reports, and it's really showing how much my writing that I learned throughout my PhD helped me to write these reports. So literally everything that you did throughout your PhD can be translated into a skill for your future job or your current job.
Thank you. I'll hand it off to Ping next.
Hi, everybody. So in terms of translating what skills I learned from my PhD to my R&D job here, I'd say a lot of it is the techniques that I learned and what could be applied to my current job, the types of techniques being done here. So the things that you can bring, your expertise in those techniques, those are the important selling points. Other than that, also the knowledge that you bring from being a PhD and your ability to innovate. To discover new things. Those are all really important assets that someone with a master's or PhD can bring to a new workplace.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And finally, Jasdeep, what are your thoughts on this?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us be part of this presentation. My thoughts on this question, I think I started with figuring out what I liked to do, what I liked about my PhD, and how I could apply that into a career where the skills that I liked to do and I was good at matched what I wanted in a job. So in our PhD, or at least in my PhD, I felt like I got exposed to a range of different skills, and I did that on purpose, almost intentionally, to be involved in a number of different organizations and committees to figure out what I like to do. And at the end of it, I realized I really like to present. I absolutely hated sitting at a desk and writing. I like to present and I like to speak and actually not do the science. So once I figured out I like to do that and I was half decent at it, I found a career that aligned with actually doing that exact thing. And so yeah, I would say the first step is really understanding what do you like to do, and then finding things that translate into that.
Oh, it's a really good point. I completely agree with that, and I'm trying to do that throughout my master's degree as well, for sure. The second question relates to decision-making processes at points of career transition. And thinking about the current positions that you will have now, are they your dream jobs, or do they simply fall into your lap? And how did they happen, and why did you choose them? So along that line of things, we'll have Vanessa start us off again.
Perfect. So my dream job, so we're all early career professionals. I don't really know what my dream job is yet, but I know that I wanted to find something I loved. Kind of like Jazz was saying, I didn't particularly love the technical aspect of the PhD, like the doing experiments so much. So I really wanted to go into a field where you're still involved in research, but kind of at a different angle. So my job might not be my dream job at the moment, but it's definitely fulfilling me and giving me a lot of experience to continue in this field. So we're kind of in the science and innovation non-for-profit sector. So yeah, it kind of just fell into my lap. My first job right out of my PhD was with the TELUS World of Science Edmonton, doing education from kindergarten to grade 12. And that was kind of a dream come true working at the Science Center. But I did miss science and research. So neither of those were my dream job, but they definitely fulfilled a lot of the things I enjoyed from my PhD. So the science communication aspect.
Awesome, thank you. Ping?
Yeah, so for me, I knew I wanted to keep doing research. That didn't mean I didn't check other types of jobs. I did get a short part-time job with G Healthcare Life Sciences, now Saitida, that was doing a sales type job. And it's good to explore the different fields that are out there in terms of scientific lines of work. I tried that. I looked into teaching. I looked into other types of things, but to me, I wanted to stay in R&D. In terms of what my dream job was, so I kind of had an idea that I'd like to do bench work, and after that, it was a matter of focusing on where I can find that job, and that is. There's a lot of options for bench work in industry or in academia. Deciding between academia and industry was kind of easy, to be honest. Academia is getting, in my opinion, getting tougher and tougher these days. So industry was the next, seemed like a much better choice. So I looked for different companies that would hire PhD grads, and I think I found a pretty good job for myself. I don't think anyone really has a good idea what a dream job can be and what that would entail, but you just try and then see if you fit in somewhere and see how it goes.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Yeah. Thank you. And Jessie?
I would say becoming an MSL was my dream job outside of this. That was the job I wanted straight out of my PhD. And so interestingly enough, when I finished my PhD last fall, I was already on the hunt for a position, and I was interviewing with several companies, and I was really focused on making this my primary goal. And I remember my PI, she asked me to stay on part-time to do some experiments. And I thought about it because, you know, it still gave me something to do and supplement some income, but it really, I thought it would deter me from my goal. And actually I needed to spend my time searching for a job as a job. And so I denied her request, and luckily I worked at home, so I lived at home. So I was still able to support myself that way. And so I was determined to get this job, and I probably applied to at least 10 jobs a week. And interestingly, I actually got another job before I landed this one. I got an offer with Stem Cell Technologies. I think most people probably know what that is, a biotech company here in Vancouver, as a product manager. So I wanted to move out of home. I wanted to leave Edmonton and move to Vancouver. So I took that as an opportunity of just at least having an income and an ability to support myself in Vancouver. So I actually did that for 2 weeks. And the offer for this job, the hiring process for this job was happening kind of simultaneously. And so after working at Stem Cell for about 2 weeks, I let them know I actually accepted another offer. And they were completely understanding of it and understood, as they realized that I was probably interviewing at several places at the same time. And just in terms of timing, Stem Cell gave me an offer first. But I realized even in that 2 weeks, I did not want to be a product manager, just for my own kind of what I wanted. But yeah, and then once I got this job, I felt like all the effort and time and the way I really structured my job search paid off. So I kept my eyes on the goal.
Yeah, I just want to add, Jazz and I would go to Tim Hortons kind of when we were writing our thesis, and she would always be talking about MSL. And it just shows that if you really do know your dream job, or you know what job you want to do, keep going for it. Yeah, it sounds daunting to do 10, apply to 10 jobs a week, but it's not. This is what you're going to do after your grad school. If you want it, go for it. So I was really impressed with just her determination, and then it worked out. So it just shows to go for what you want.
Yeah, I had lots of people tell me that it would be really difficult, and it's really, really hard to break into. And I mean, it wasn't easy, but I think if you have a goal set in mind and you keep working at something and you keep interviewing, you'll just get better and better. And you can't really take the first door being shut as the last kind of experience. So, yeah.
Well, I'm really glad it worked out for you. This is the first time I'm personally hearing this story, so it was very interesting. Thanks for sharing. So on to our next question. This relates to the top tips or insights within your particular field or industry that you would like to tell everybody. So Jasdeep, as a medical science liaison, could you tell us how you got involved in this industry and how you initially bridged the gap from school to work and prepared yourself to work in this industry? So that question is a lot what you already talked about, but if you had any more thoughts to add, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, how I got involved. So like I said, I really structured my job search. So I would use LinkedIn, all the companies I wanted to work for. I would look at all of their posts, have alerts. So I was early in applying. Sometimes that really does help if you apply when the posting first comes out. Other companies, not as much. They won't look at the pool, but I think to be, the safest, you could just apply earlier to increase your chances. And then I also networked like crazy. So I would make a goal of who I was gonna, or how many people I was gonna talk to that week, and what I wanted out of it. Not just networking for the sake of just talking to someone, but really what answers or what questions do I still want to answer? And following up with those people too. I think that's important. And that's also the job of being an MSL, is really networking with physicians. So I realized like, oh, I really like networking. Like I like talking to people and almost talking on the fly. So as I did it more, I think that actually prepared me for my job. And it's something one mentor actually said to me. He said, oh, like you're already doing the job. And he, after just speaking to him on the phone once, they offered me an interview for their company. Unfortunately, I didn't get it, but it was that's the thing. I feel like the more hits you put out, the better your chances will be of something coming back. Part of it is just luck and timing, and other part of it is your efforts. But I feel like if you cast a wider net, then the chances of something getting picked up is your chances increase. So that would be my practical advice. For bridging the gap, I don't know if like no one teaches you how to be an MSL like during my PhD, I wasn't taught that. I think I joined a company which had a great manager and other PhDs who all had also started out kind of without too much experience. So I had a good team around me to help to bridge the gap. But I think if you have the soft skills for this career, and which requires, good presentation skills, good interpersonal skills, you will be successful. So I think it's more about knowing what you're good at and what you can do, and then it kind of falls into place.
That's awesome. Thank you. Ping, could you weigh in from your role from research and development?
Yeah, so in terms of things that I've learned from my job in research and development, it's mostly, I'll break it down into like what I've learned working in industry actually. And just for industry, just understanding the kind of scale of different positions and departments that are necessary to run a good industry. Like I said, for me, I joined R&D, and that involved in the beginning a lot of the optimization of the products. So what I liked about that is that there's a goal, which is to sell a product. And so you're working almost 24/7 to make your product as good as possible. So versus what I was doing in academia, that was, I like that a lot more just because it's more goal oriented. And then from there, like once we're able to get a good product, then the next thing would be to perform the scale up part. So there's a lot of jobs in that scale up part. So there's things like manufacturing types of jobs, jobs in quality control, quality assurance, reviewing those types of documents. And then the next step after that is after you figure out scale up, then there's those jobs that bring the product to the clinic. So that involves types of jobs like clinical coordinators, regulatory affairs. You need writers to do that. You need to learn those skills to work with investors, pitching your ideas to investors. There's also a lot of jobs for consultants. So consultants in terms of some people have expertise in a certain technique, some people have expertise in regulatory affairs. So just being in the industry and being exposed to all those different kinds of jobs was something really insightful to me.
Thank you. Those were some awesome tips there. And Vanessa, from your field in research program management, what are your thoughts?
So kind of to build off Ping, once you get into different fields, you realize how many jobs there actually are within that one field. So we work in science and innovation, and we work in funding. So there's about 48 projects under my portfolio along with my boss. So we manage all these projects, but there's also the funders that we have to report to. So Alberta Innovates and a lot of departments under the government also have people who we have to report to. So there's just, I guess, on the science management part of things, there's project managers who report to me, and then there's research program managers, and then there's funding people. So it's just, you kind of don't know when you're in your PhD. And the big insight I see is there's so much behind the scenes. Like we go into our graduate program, we do our experiment, but you don't realize all the work that the PI had to do and all the people that are behind all of those funding just to even advocate in government. So there's a lot of science policy behind it. There's the big one, I guess, that I've opened my eyes to is Alberta Innovates. There's so many PhDs and master students from all fields of life sciences that are working in those industries to push science forward for graduate students to be able to do the research. So my biggest insight from my field is how much behind the scenes and how many jobs there are and how much we do need graduate students graduating with these skills, as well as you. In my field, I don't think you could do it with just having a project manager certificate, let's say. You really do need to, the job said PhD in genetics or master's with project management experience. So it just shows how valuable our education actually is. I think a lot of us I get flustered. I know in my last year, I was like, there's no jobs out there for us, but I think we might talk about it later about how to look for jobs. But the biggest insight was how valuable our 5, 6, 7, however long your PhD is. Those years were very valuable and they weren't a waste. You contributed to science, but you also were doing some professional development. So biggest insight is there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, I think I really saw that realization with you, because I remember when you're in your last 2 years of your PhD, you were like, why am I even here? Why am I doing this? This isn't what I want to do. Like, I shouldn't have done this. I should have done something else.
I feel like, have you done a PhD if you haven't had that thought at least once? What's the point of all of this?
Yeah, so it felt good to realize there is a point, and we need people who are in the fields that all of us and a lot of the participants who are watching today, like we need these people who are educated. So it's nice to know that there are jobs out there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like every time I learn about a new field, that I didn't realize before, there's just so much to it. There's like worlds that exist that you don't even realize when you're in certain positions of your life. And as you go through different experiences, you're like, wow, this exists. Like, that's amazing. I had no idea this was a thing. And then you can get really passionate and deep into it when you don't even know it existed 2 years ago, right? Okay. So on that note of connections, so connections and maintaining a network is a critical part of career development and growth. My question is, how did connections and network play into your job search and attainment? And I know that connections played quite a bit into your search. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, so in terms of how I got my current job, it wasn't really a position. There wasn't even a position really. It was, I had met my current boss right now, Arun, through a seminar, a retreat, and I just happened to be sitting at the same table as him because I knew someone else from his lab. And you know, at these seminars or retreats or whatever, like you should make the effort to talk to whoever's there and get to know what they're working on, tell them a bit about yourself so that they know you. So that was maybe in my second year of grad school, and close to when I was graduating and I was really looking for a job. I saw him again a few times. So one time was actually through my other job, my part-time job with GE, just walking around from lab to lab, and then happened to see him, struck up a conversation, and then saw him a couple of times at the Tim Hortons downstairs in the Cates here a couple of times, and chatted. And one day I just asked him for coffee, and then he obliged and chatted with him some more. And he said, yeah, like we have a potential opening for a position if you want to apply. Happened to apply and get the job. So for me, networking is a really important thing, just like in terms of where you can get leads. And even if it's not someone you know directly, it's always good to use your networks to ask if you can introduce me to somebody. So for me, networks is super important for getting a job.
Mm-hmm. And the Tim Hortons and Cates, it's a key part of it.
Yes. That's where we did all our interviews, actually.
And Vanessa, your experience with connections is quite different from Pink's, actually. Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, I definitely see the value in making connections to get jobs, but I do understand that the idea of networking is daunting, and you know, where do you start? But like Pink said, you can make connections at seminar. I know, you know, a lot of us rush off and we want to get back to our experiment, but looking back now, I wish I would have made more connections at places like that. But at the end of the day, what I kind of did was make connections through building relationships. And just like Piggin said, that could lead to an opportunity. But in my two roles, so the year that I spent at the Science Center and now with Genome Alberta as the research program manager, I actually didn't know anyone. I just applied through online and I happened to get the job. So where connections come into play for me is kind of the network I built of support and references. So I was a coordinator with Let's Talk Science for I think my whole PhD, so maybe 6 years. And I was able to build that network to really support me. You know, I bounce ideas off of them, the MedGen crew, all the people we made there. I go to them for advice, for mentorship, and we're always, you know, bouncing ideas off each other. So for me, the networking is not only to get a job, but it's to give you people to have your back, to read your resume, to help you with job searches. So yeah, I didn't necessarily use my network to get my jobs that I got right out of my PhD, but I definitely used my network to just help me I think I even practiced with one of my friends some interview questions beforehand. So wherever you can make connections through volunteering, Abby, we made a connection through being a summer student, and you know, if I ever need some reference or you need a reference, I'm sure we could go to each other. So
mostly me needing a reference from you.
So yeah, I think connections are not only about jobs, but also relationship building. But you can always make connections. It's not too late to start networking as well, as one thing I want to make clear. Even if you're in your last month of your PhD, start reaching out to people, even on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure. Jazzy, did you have any thoughts to add?
Yeah, I didn't start networking until about halfway through my PhD. I found that at least that's probably when I realized I wanted to become an MSL. And so that's probably when I did start networking. I didn't understand the value of it before that. And I think, like everyone spoke to, networking is also great because it does help you find a job. But for me, a lot of it was understanding what the job is. There was only so much I could look up online, and I wanted to understand what the nuances of the job were. And actually those speaking points really helped me in interviews in the future, of just candidly speaking about what an MSL actually did. But for the several rounds of interviews that I had with several companies before I landed at Astellas, I would say half of them was through internal references of people I'd built a network with. And then half of them was just straight up applying. So yeah, I think your network helps. It can give you an internal reference, but it also, you might come out learning something about the job that may actually deter you from it or keep you intrigued. But the position that I got now actually was from an internal reference. So somebody I just one day randomly messaged on LinkedIn, kept a relationship for like 2 years. And he knew about all my interviews and failed interviews. And so then when something popped up at his company, he put in a good word for me, and then I was able to interview and then get it. So at the end, my networking helped, but I think for the other positions that I interviewed for, a few of them, which I got to the last round of interview, they were also without an internal reference. So it's not impossible, at least in my career, to apply outright and get an opportunity to interview.
Yeah, for sure. And I have an additional question to that. If any of you wanted to answer for that, is what are some ways that job seekers can make connections in less formal settings during the pandemic where we lack the opportunities to meet people at conferences and events? Because that's something I'm really struggling with now, is where like the wine and cheese nights that would have happened, or the seminars that would have happened, or whatever event that would have happened during my degree isn't happening.
Yeah, so that's something I could speak to. So I've even had a few of these requests. So it's still possible to message people on LinkedIn and ask for a coffee, or maybe coffees aren't such a good idea these days, but you can still ask people for those, and people are willing to take some time to either Zoom or meet outdoors, I suppose, or people are still willing to give their time for that. It always helps if you introduce yourself through LinkedIn or email through someone else that that person knows as well. Then they take those types of requests a bit more seriously if you name drop. But if not, if you tailor the message to be a bit more specific to what you can find about that person, that helps a lot to have the person respond. Because that usually is the biggest problem. Like, maybe they don't respond, but usually like people are busy and it's tough to find the time. But I would say try to reach out to people through LinkedIn or email, and then if they don't respond, you can try again, and they'll just show that you're interested, right? Don't like message them like 20 times a day or anything like that, but something reasonable.
Yeah, thank you.
I think putting the word out. Oh, sorry, Abby.
No, go for it.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, LinkedIn like definitely helped me. Well, like I found my job pre-COVID, but that was my #1 resource of connecting with people. So hopefully that gives people some assurance. But I think for me also, like as Vanessa said, she knew I wanted this opportunity. My PI knew, my supervisory committee knew, like everyone knew what I wanted to do. So they'd be like, oh, I know this guy who works for Takeda. Like, do you want to talk to him? So I think if your natural connections that you already have, and like your PI and your supervisory committee and your fellow like lab mates and people in your department are a really good place to start, and being like, oh, I'm kind of looking into, potentially doing a postdoc or whatever it might be. If people are aware of your interest, they might think of you, and connect you. And I find that that's a really more of an organic way to build that relationship instead of feeling like you're harassing somebody to talk to you.
Yeah.
Sure. I agree with the LinkedIn stuff too. It's I don't think I've used it as much, but I know that if someone approached me to do a virtual coffee and to talk about my job, I would be happy to, you know, time permitting. And like Ping said, I think we got to just put ourselves out there more. And, you know, if you get a rejection, even a job rejection, or you're just asking for a virtual talk or a phone call and they reject you, that's okay. People are busy. That it's not that you should feel embarrassed or anything. I think just put yourself out there, kind of like what Jazz is saying, and get the word out. But another thing that has helped me a lot is I'm known to just Google everything, and I Google webinars, I Google career this, career that. So one major thing I do is I subscribe to Science to Business Network. I subscribe to Wisest, UAWise, Tech Edmonton. Literally, my inbox is always full. But it gives me opportunity to find all these random webinars or panels like this one. So another opportunity is through the AlumLab. But really what that does is maybe you didn't interact with them because you're just listening. But what you can do after is go add them on LinkedIn. And like Pink said, make a personalized message. Oh, I really enjoyed that you said this, or I really like that talk. I was wondering if we can connect. So I think programs like that are really, they're out there. You just have to look for them. So there's a mentorship program that I applied for this year through UAWise, and I got a position. And so there's one mentor and then two of us. So early career professional and then a graduate student. And, you know, there's a network I just made. And yeah, you just got to find opportunities.
And just to follow up to what Vanessa said, like during your PhD, there's a lot of lab work and things like that, but it's so worth it to carve out the time to learn these types of skills, be it by joining different types of seminars or different types of groups. It's so important to find time to learn what's out there, and even learning those little soft skills that you don't learn through being on the bench. Through all those different activities.
Yeah, I was told actually early on when I started my master's that take every opportunity that was presented to you. And if you can do it within your time, go for it and attend it, meet people, talk to people. So totally understand. Okay, so then my next question, for myself as a master's student looking towards starting my career, I'm finding it really hard to conceptualize what jobs would actually look like post-graduation. So for example, like what would an entry position look like for the degree that I'm in and what would it be called? And so to that note, I would like to ask the panelists to give 3 tips that they used on their first steps of like just getting on their computer and searching. So like, what did you type? What search engines did you use? And how did you build those networks and connections? The networks and connections part, we always just have good conversation about, so you can focus on the first 2.
I could start. So I think the first thing, first tip is to be open, completely open. Just, yes, my field was medical genetics, my PhD, but that doesn't mean that I need to have a job that is in genetics. That's how it happened for me. I'm in genomics at the moment, but it doesn't have to be. I was Googling. So I guess my first tip is to be open. Second tip is kind of the stuff to Google in the search engine. So I would go to Google and I would type in PhD science communication. And then I would drop the PhD and put jobs in science communication. And then I would put jobs in science education. Like pretty much just Google everything you can. I guess keywords I used were PhD science and then what I wanted. So if I wanted to do research and development, I would have done research and development, but I was focused more on communication and education. So a combination of those words is what I typed. And that's exactly how I found the TELS World of Science position and the Genome Alberta position. I think I typed PhD science program management and it was the first hit. So I really just used Google. I also used LinkedIn. So my third tip is to use LinkedIn. That's where you kind of find all these random positions that you never thought about. It shows if somebody's looked at your profile. I'm pretty sure that month I looked at everybody's profile in Alberta and I just had no shame. Like, that's fine. Go look at everyone's profile, read what they do. Because that's where I found, Alberta Innovates has this, or, there's this biotech company hiring. So by seeing other people's positions, not only do you get some insight into their job, because some people write really good descriptions, but you get to know all these companies that I never knew existed. So LinkedIn was also good for that for me.
Honestly, your search reminds me of like Boolean searches and like using the terms like the asterisk to like search on moving libraries. It's random. Jazz, do you want to give any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it before. I really used LinkedIn. And then I think I had like subscribed to maybe 30 different companies. Like my focus, my job search was very directed. So I think in a way that helped because I knew exactly what to search. But yeah, I went to like 30 different companies and was on their mail list. And then also once you've spoken to, usually the first call is either by an internal recruiter, external recruiter, or a hiring manager. And if they spoke to you and you got far along in the process, or even if they spoke to you and then you didn't go forward, sometimes they think about you and another position would come up, and then reach out to you themselves if you made a good impression on them, and they thought you could be a good fit, even for a different position in their company, or similarly to what you were looking for. So yeah, I would say for me, the biggest resource was LinkedIn. And then I had the alerts, and then it was a lot there for a while. Like LinkedIn sends you like a ton of, based on your filter, sometimes you can get tons of jobs like a day. So I would say don't get overwhelmed if you are that way, stay focused and directed, but it's again, like a good resource. And I actually paid for LinkedIn premium during my job hunt. I don't think it's cheap. I think it's like $35 or $40 a month. But I canceled it right away once I got my job. But it, I forget what the benefit, like you could see who was looking at your profile, I think. You could see how many people applied to certain positions and like what backgrounds that people had that were applying to positions. So you could kind of gauge where you sat. So yeah, I, you know, if you feel like it, you could pay for it, but I don't think it's necessary. I think I was just going a little bit overboard. But yeah, I think those are the tools I used.
Thank you. And Ping, what did you have to say?
Yeah, first of all, I agree completely with what Vanessa and Jazz both said. Like Google is your best friend, and as a master's or a PhD, your Googling skills are probably refined as well. So definitely make sure to use Google. Vanessa gave some really good tips about how to search for different jobs. If you don't know what kind of jobs are out there, like Google it, but also like good things to do is look at people's LinkedIn profiles. You can look at the types of responsibilities they have and the types of jobs that they might be doing, so you can get some ideas there. Another way is to look at go to the different pharmaceutical companies' websites if you're interested in that. And you can even find their financial reports and see whatever media releases they come out with. Those are all really good gauges of information. Like for example, if you want to get hired right now, you could go look at companies that are working on COVID research or COVID vaccine or therapy. There's a lot of different strategies you can take just by looking online and having some directed searches.
Good to know. Thank you. Okay, so our last topic covers considerations due to the pandemic, which I think is pretty relevant right now. Ping, since your work directly relates to COVID-19, could you share some thoughts with us?
Yeah, so with us, like hiring hasn't stopped since the pandemic. And actually, if you look at different graphs of when PhDs get hired, November to December is actually peak hiring time, and then it starts to slow down in January to March or so. So even while we're full swing in the pandemic, hiring is still very high for masters and PhDs. In terms of considerations, like I'll speak to what I know about R&D, like these are like low-hanging fruits, like these COVID types of research jobs. If a company is working on COVID, definitely they'll be hiring for a variety of different positions. So those are good places to look. But otherwise, when you do get a job, if you want to stand out in your resume. You have to have other types of skills these days, such as being able to show that you know how to work remotely. So be it you're sharing data remotely with your lab or other types of things, remote work and the ability to do it is really important now. The ability to manage people or projects remotely, that's really important. So those are all skills that you can learn during your PhD or master's through regular things like I mentioned, like presenting data or just communicating with lab members.
Yeah, for sure. And Vanessa, could you speak to how you do job searches during a pandemic?
Yeah, so I resigned from the Telsworld of Science in July, and then because I started my new job in July, so I actually found my position at Genome Alberta during the pandemic. So I applied in May and then started in July. So my whole job search was throughout the pandemic, and I guess my insights or my considerations during a pandemic is, everything's virtual already. So people are getting used to that. Like Ping said, you have to be ready to conduct interviews virtually. And I just see a question here about how do you find the right people to reach out on LinkedIn during COVID times? If anything, COVID, all it did was make everything virtual. So it's easier to reach out to people on LinkedIn and wherever you go for your networking, but people are already on their computers. So this is, people are going to be checking their LinkedIn maybe even more now because we're always on our computers. So COVID just really made everything virtual. But in terms of the, I guess, job searching, I guess I didn't find it different job searching when I was job searching for the Telsworld Science job and then job searching for now. If anything, I just had more time to job search because I was already on my computer. But I think the biggest difference was the interview. So obviously the interview had to move virtual. And it was now talking to my boss, I actually talked to him this week about his experience. And from their point of view, it's harder for the recruiter because they don't get to know, they don't get to feel who you are. They don't get to see your mannerisms and really get to experience all of what you bring. But for me, it was funny because I was saying, I was way more comfortable at this position than when I when I interviewed for the Telsworld of Science, because I was at home, I had my comfy blanket, I had my 3 screens, and I had my notes, and I had this over here. So I honestly think I was much more relaxed interviewing during the pandemic because you're just at home. So it felt more comfortable. So as long as you're prepared for your interview, you did your research on the company, you did your research on the position, you learned how to market your skills, you checked your resume, you double checked your resume, you sent it to people to look at. As long as you have those things that were important before the pandemic going into now, then there's really no difference besides actually feeling more comfortable because you get to interview at home. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like it being virtual has taken down a lot of barriers that I would have felt if it was in person. I feel more comfortable talking to large groups of people because I can't see half the people. So it really doesn't affect me as much. And Jesse, did you have any final thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I want to echo what Vanessa is saying. I don't think the job search, at least for my industry or the pharmaceutical industry, has changed. They're all still posted online. I don't think my company typically does any hiring booths or anything like that in person. All their jobs are just posted online, so that wouldn't change. Where it really does change is the interview. For all the job interviews that I got to the final round, I was flown to Toronto, and you have to give a presentation, and you're sitting in a panel in front of hiring managers and executives, and it's pretty intimidating. You're sweating and you don't know what they're going to ask you, and you have to present on their data. And so I think it's very, very nerve-wracking, and you're sweating the whole time you're flying there. But I think now what Vanessa said is it's so true. You feel a lot more comfortable. You have your own kind of comforts around home, but it also makes your online presence just as more important. They spoke to your resume, they're going to scrutinize it a little bit more. Your LinkedIn profile, they want to get a feel of what your personality is, and it's much, much harder to read your energy, I think, over the camera versus in person. Sometimes in person, I felt in the interviews, they even wanted you to crack and crack under pressure and give you those long silences, which you felt like sometimes you had to keep filling in. And so they use those types of, I think, like pressure tactics in real life that I don't know, I haven't interviewed now virtually, at least in the panel interview, but I think in a lot of ways it'll be easier, but also in a little bit more difficult to just show your confidence and show who you really are. Like, for example, I speak a lot with my hands, but you may not necessarily be able to see it if my camera is not there, like it adjusted to show my hands. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing to speak with your hands, but yeah, and like, you know, impressions, like, you know, whether I think anyone, my experience was that, like, you know, when I went to an interview, you know, you dressed, how you were dressed really actually made a big impression or not. They wanted you to show that you took the role seriously and that you put an effort to not only your, you know, appearance in the sense that maybe your pants were ironed or whatever, but those types of things, they can't necessarily judge off the computer anymore, how, you know, you're going to represent their company. At least for my job, how you represent your company, because it is a physician facing role, is so important. And you're the face of the company. So I don't know how they judge that now, but I guess the way we interact with physicians is virtually anyway. So they want to know how you interact with them virtually. So yeah.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for your insightful thoughts and for sharing your stories today. It's all very interesting to hear. And we're going to move on to some of our audience's questions now. Just for time, so we can finish on time, I'm going to ask that only one panelist answer a question. And if somebody has other thoughts to add, they can add quickly and they'll move on to the next one. First up, I wanted to ask is, did the panelists complete any internships during their PhDs? And do the non-academic employers look for internship experience in candidates?
I did not.
No internship.
I got an interview for an internship in a medical affairs department with a company, but I didn't get it. And it would have been an internship after you complete your PhD. So it's not it wouldn't have been part of your PhD.
Yeah.
And I didn't really see them.
You go ahead, Vanessa.
Sorry, I didn't really see, like, in my job search, internship needed or or, you know, whatever the requirements are. So.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, and what I was gonna say is, like, I've been involved in the hiring process for some of the employees here, and it's not just the fact that they have an internship listed on their resume, it's what types of experiences that they were able to learn and techniques or exposure to different fields that they were able to learn that are valuable. For example, one person that we hired, he had an internship with another company that did similar things to us, and that's valuable experience that set him apart from other people. So it's definitely worth having an internship just so that your experiences is more varied than someone that's just been working in a lab, right?
Yeah, for sure. Any added things that you can add onto your resume would make a difference. Even
volunteering too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, the next question is, have you ever had to counter the notion that PhDs are overqualified in an industry? And if so, how did you respond?
I guess during my job search, I didn't even think, am I overqualified? Am I underqualified? Some would say I was overqualified for my Telescope of Science job because it just required a bachelor. And then some would say I was underqualified for the job I have now because I didn't have the 3 years actual project management experience. So I really urge everyone to just get that out of their head that you can be overqualified. If it's a job you like, if it's a job you want, go for it. If you feel you're overqualified, then I guess maybe you don't like that. There's something that's not speaking to you from that job, but a company's going to look at your resume, and let's go with the TELS job. If I was overqualified, then you just have to sell yourself. Why do you want it then? So I really said, I love science education. I volunteered with Let's Talk Science. I love teaching kids. You know, I really sold my why. Why am I here? Why did I apply for this job? So I think just my experience and what I'm going to tell myself going forward is just apply for whatever job you like. If you're underqualified, overqualified, just go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, and having an advanced degree will also only help you to have more potential openings that you can have, at least in industry, right? Like for some leadership positions in industry, you have to have a PhD. So I would be in line with what Vanessa said. You can still get different types of jobs with PhD. Don't feel like I've never seen that notion of it being overqualified.
Yeah, I'm speaking to the pharmaceutical industry, at least for medical affairs, which is the department that I'm part of. I think everyone has a PhD except for a few people who have masters, specifically masters in biotech from Toronto. I think that program there provides internships and then allows people to get exposure to industry, which the pharmaceutical industry, which we don't have here in Alberta, but that's a unique program there. But I would say, if anything, anything less than a PhD for my industry would limit me for certain types of roles in the future. More leadership or director type roles, there's people who have had tons of experience and could do the job easily, but because they don't have a PhD after their name and they only have a master's, they can't get it. So I would say, if anything, sometimes it doesn't even matter what your PhD is in. From my experience in my industry, they just want those 3 letters just as a check for some positions, that are advanced leadership positions.
That's interesting that they didn't even care what the background of your PhD was in. They just wanted to have that.
No one, when I was interviewing, it was really unique. No one really cared what my PhD was in. No one cared what my publications were. I didn't even include my publications on my resume. So yeah, I think what the real big take home is, like, and I got this feedback from someone, was like, the PhD really teaches you perseverance. And I think that's something you'll have to apply to every job. For being perseverant, being, innovative, Ping spoke to that. Being independent. I know, like, when we all probably started grad school, no one gave us a rule book on how to do things. You kind of have to figure it out. And I think having a PhD really speaks to the fact that you achieved something that, is obviously a huge task, and they think and now know that you can apply those same skills to this position. You've had to do a number of different things, from writing to presenting, and it's all about how you market those skills and speak to your experiences, because we get an opportunity to do so many different things in our masters and our PhDs.
Yeah. Okay, my last question, which we'll try and do really quickly, is did you look for jobs outside of Canada, and were you worried about being able to find a job in Canada? That was a question from one of our audience members.
So I really wanted to get a job in the US, but because of Trump's immigration policies, it became a lot more difficult. With some of my mentors who lived there, the opportunity seemed to be more easier to get, but companies stopped sponsoring after he made the immigration policies a bit stricter. But I did apply for one company in the UK, and I actually got an interview for it. I chose not to proceed after proceed down that route. I didn't want to move there anymore. But yeah, I did apply for certain companies, and the reason why I picked the UK is if you're, I think, under 30 or 31, you can get, and you're a Canadian citizen, you can get this visa that allows you to easily work in the UK, I think for up to 2 years. And so with the US, you needed a stricter visa, you needed a company to sponsor you. And with this visa, you didn't. And I think it applies to Australia too. It's like the Commonwealth countries. There's some youth visa or something. So yeah, I mean, if you're interested, you can look that up. I don't know if you can do it anymore with COVID. It might be a little more restricted.
But still good to know for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was wonderful speaking with all of you. And thank you for your contributions and taking the time. And I'm sure the audience and I for sure learned so much from what you guys had to say. I'm now going to hand it back to Elise to finish us off.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby. I really appreciate you preparing all the questions and guiding us through this conversation tonight. And thank you so much to our three panelists, Vanessa, Ping, and Jasdeep. Your experiences and your insights are incredible, and I'm sure that many of our audience members had an idea sparked. So it was great. And finally, thank you to everyone who joined us live for this session. We hope you found it valuable and that you'll continue to connect with us through the AlumLab community. The next webinar in our Career Incubator series is a fireside chat with Dr. Andy Kokaji on Wednesday, January 27th. Andy has had an impressive decade-long career with Stem Cell Technologies, a company out of Vancouver. And so please join us as we ask Andy about his journey of being promoted 8 times in 8 years and being called a creative genius by the founder and CEO of Stem Cell Technologies. And we also have 2 upcoming coffee chats scheduled as part of the Coffee Break series. So you'll have the opportunity to have coffee with 2 of our panelists tonight. Jasdeep is hosting a coffee chat on November 26th, and Vanessa is hosting on November 30th. Spots are limited for these. They're small group conversations, so please sign up as soon as you can through the AlumLab website. An email will be sent tomorrow with more information on upcoming events, as well as a feedback survey, and I invite you to share your thoughts on this webinar and let us know if you have any ideas for future events. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at a future session.